I am about to turn your understanding of how people slept in ancient Egypt upside down. Prepare to learn a lot of new and shocking information. We are used to thinking that comfortable sleep means a soft bed and a comfortable pillow. But what if I told you that entire civilizations slept on stones instead of pillows for 3,000 years? They did this not because of poverty or lack of technology, but for completely different, much deeper reasons. The ancient Egyptians did not view sleep as merely a physiological need. It was a journey into another world, full of symbols, rituals, and hidden meanings. Their sleeping accessories were not furniture, but tools that ensured the safety of the soul and body. Watch this video to the end to find out why a wooden or stone headrest was considered the height of comfort in Egypt, and how it was linked to ideas about eternal life. What I am about to show you will change your perception of comfort. The main and most surprising feature of Egyptian sleep was a pillow that was not actually a pillow. It was a headrest known as an ures, which was a crescent-shaped board on a sturdy base. These headrests were made from a variety of materials. Ordinary people used wood or fired clay, but the nobility and pharaohs ordered uriches made of alabaster, ivory, faience, and even precious metals. At first glance, sleeping on such a device seems incredibly uncomfortable. However, it had several important practical advantages. In the hot Egyptian climate, such a pillow provided excellent ventilation, allowing air to circulate freely around the head and neck. In addition, the complex hairstyles that took the noble Egyptians a long time to create remained intact. The uric raised the head above the bed, preventing the hair from becoming crumpled and dirty. This was especially important for those who wore wigs. But the main purpose of the headrest was not practical, but sacred. The Egyptians believed that the uraeus symbolized the horizon from which the sun god Ra rose every day. The head of the sleeper resting on it was likened to the solar disk, ready for rebirth. Headrests were often decorated with protective symbols and images of deities. For example, the base could be carved with the figure of the god Bes, who was considered a protector against evil spirits and nightmares. Thus, the uraeus was not just a piece of furniture, but a powerful amulet. This belief was so strong that headrests were even placed in tombs. It was believed that in the afterlife, the deceased would need protection and help for daily resurrection along with the sun. The famous ures from Tutankhamun's tomb is a vivid example of this. The very act of sleeping on such a structure required a certain habit. The head was fixed in one position, which according to some researchers could contribute to a more peaceful and deeper sleep. Egyptians were accustomed to this position during rest from childhood. Despite its apparent rigidity, for the ancient Egyptians, it was the standard for proper and safe sleep. It combined practicality, status, and deep religious significance. The uraeus was a bridge between the world of humans and the world of gods. Do you think you could fall asleep on such a pillow for the sake of preserving your hairstyle and protecting yourself from evil spirits? Share your opinion in the comments. What if I told you that the Egyptian bed was more like a modern deck chair? Beds in ancient Egypt were very different from ours. They consisted of a wooden frame with a net of ropes or leather straps stretched over it, which served as a mattress. The design was simple but very functional. This woven base provided good ventilation from below, which was vital in a hot climate. It prevented the body from overheating during sleep. The beds of the pharaohs and nobles were true works of art. They were made of precious woods such as cedar or ebony and richly decorated. The frames were covered with inlays of ivory, faience, and precious metals. The legs of the beds were often carved in the shape of animal paws, which had symbolic meaning. It was believed that such supports gave the sleeper strength and protected them. However, this was a privilege exclusively reserved for the upper classes. An interesting feature of many Egyptian beds was their slight incline. The headboard was often made slightly higher than the footboard. Sometimes the bed had a special rail at the foot to prevent the sleeper from sliding off. Ordinary Egyptians, of course, could not afford such luxury. Most of them slept on mats made of reeds or palm leaves spread directly on the clay floor. The bed was one of the most important pieces of furniture in the house and an indicator of its owner's status. The richer and more influential a person was, the more complex and expensive their bed was. The mere presence of a bed was a sign of wealth. Beds were designed for one person. Even in the bedrooms of the pharaohs, husbands and wives often slept in separate beds, albeit side by side. This was due to both hygiene considerations and personal comfort. The examples found in tombs, such as the beds from Tutankhamun's tomb, are striking in their elegance and complexity. Some of them were collapsible, which indicates a high level of carpentry skill. It was real portable furniture for the afterlife. But the bed was only the foundation. Are you ready to find out what was hidden behind the simple linen fabric that the Egyptians used instead of blankets? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Egyptian weavers. Instead of the blankets and duvet covers we are familiar with, the Egyptians used linen sheets. Linen was the main textile material in ancient Egypt, and its quality was valued throughout the ancient world. The Egyptian climate was ideal for growing flax. The process of processing it was long and laborious, but the result was worth it. Egyptian craftsmen knew how to produce fabric of incredible fineness and softness. Linen fabrics had unique properties that were ideal for hot weather. They were highly breathable, allowing the body to breathe and absorb moisture. Sleeping under such a sheet was comfortable even on the most stifling night. The Egyptians slept naked, covering themselves with one or more linen sheets. The number of layers depended on the air temperature. The white color of linen had a special meaning. It was associated with purity, light, and the divine world. Therefore, bed linen, like clothing, was predominantly snow white. The production of the finest royal linen was a state monopoly. This fabric was so light and transparent that it was valued by weight in silver. It was used to make clothes and bedding for the pharaoh and the highest nobility. Washing and bleaching linen was an important part of everyday life. Fabrics were washed in the waters of the Nile, using natural soda ash as a detergent. Linen was not only an item of comfort, but also an important part of funeral equipment. It was believed that in the afterlife, the deceased would also need clean and fresh sheets. Therefore, entire chests of bedding were placed in tombs. Some of the linen fabrics found are so thin that modern technology can hardly reproduce such quality. Egyptian weavers possessed secrets, many of which have been lost. Their craftsmanship transformed a simple plant into a luxury item. Thus, a linen sheet was not just a piece of fabric. It was a symbol of purity, status, and technological perfection of civilization. It ensured comfortable sleep in earthly life and accompanied the deceased into eternity. This is what happened behind the closed doors of Egyptian homes after sunset. The arrangement of sleeping places in an Egyptian home depended heavily on the social status of the family and the time of year. In the homes of ordinary people, there were often no separate bedrooms. The family slept together in the main, and often only, room of the house. At night, this room was turned into a shared bedroom. Mats or mattresses were spread out directly on the floor and removed in the morning to free up space. During the hot season, life moved to the roof. The flat roofs of Egyptian houses were the perfect place to sleep under the open sky. The night breeze brought welcome coolness after the heat of the day. Sleeping on the roof was common practice for all segments of the population. It was not only comfortable, but also safe. The elevated position protected against some ground creatures and provided a better view. The homes of wealthy Egyptians and nobles, of course, had separate bedrooms. They were usually located in the most private and protected part of the house, away from the entrance. This ensured peace and privacy. The bedroom of a nobleman was furnished with more than just a bed. There could be chests for storing clothes and linen, a small table, and an armchair. The walls could be decorated with paintings depicting scenes from life or mythology. The windows in Egyptian houses were small and located high up near the ceiling. This was done to allow less direct sunlight and hot air to enter. Servants and slaves slept wherever they could. They might sleep on mats in the corridors, in the kitchen, or at the entrance to their master's chambers. Their sleep was short and light, as they had to be ready to carry out orders at any moment. The interior decoration of the bedrooms was quite ascetic. The Egyptians did not like to clutter the space with unnecessary furniture. The main elements were a bed, a headboard, and a chest for personal belongings. Thus, the place for sleeping was a very flexible concept. It could be moved from the first floor to the roof, from a common room to a separate one. The main criterion for choice was always climatic comfort. But how did they ensure privacy and comfort in their bedrooms? In the next chapter, we will look at the layout of an Egyptian bedroom. The interior of an Egyptian bedroom reflected a desire for simplicity and functionality. The bed was always located in the center of the room. It was the main and most valuable piece of furniture in the room. Chests and boxes were often placed next to or under the bed. They were used to store spare bedding, clothing, and personal items. The bedroom was lit by oil lamps. These were simple ceramic vessels with wicks filled with castor or sesame oil. They gave off a dim, smoky light. The floors in the homes of ordinary people were earthen or clay. They were covered with reed mats, which added comfort and cleanliness. The walls in simple dwellings were simply clay, but in the homes of the nobility, they were covered with white plaster and painted with bright colors. The paintings could depict natural motifs, religious scenes, or portraits of the owners. Doorways were often covered with mats or fabric curtains. This provided some privacy and protected against drafts. Wooden doors were a luxury that not everyone could afford. Despite the presence of bedrooms, the concept of personal space was different. In large families, several people could sleep in one room. Privacy, as we understand it today, was very rare. Ventilation was a key element of design. In addition to small windows under the ceiling, the design of wealthy homes sometimes included special wind catchers. These devices on the roof caught the cool north wind and directed it into the house. The furniture was light and mobile. It could be easily moved from place to place or taken outside for drying and cleaning. This helped to maintain hygiene in the home. Overall, the Egyptian bedroom was primarily a functional space. It was designed for rest and sleep in a hot climate. Unnecessary details and decorations were considered superfluous. Are you ready to learn the truth about what the Egyptians did before going to sleep? Preparing for sleep in ancient Egypt was a whole ritual, especially for members of the upper classes. It included hygiene and cosmetic procedures. Evening ablutions were an essential part of the daily routine. The Egyptians were very clean. They washed their hands and feet, and if possible, their entire bodies. After ablutions, it was time for cosmetic procedures. Both men and women lined their eyes with black kohl paint. This was not only a fashion statement, but also protection from the bright sun and sand. Various oils and incense were applied to the body. In a dry and hot climate, this helped to moisturize the skin and protect it from cracking. Before going to bed, Egyptians changed into simpler clothes. Usually, this was a loose loincloth or a light tunic made of coarse linen. Sleeping in the same clothes that were worn during the day was considered unhygienic. The evening meal was light. Egyptians believed that going to bed on a full stomach was harmful. The main meal was in the middle of the day. Prayers were an important part of the evening ritual. Before going to bed, the Egyptians asked the gods for protection from nighttime dangers and evil spirits. They asked for peaceful sleep and a safe awakening. The family gathered together to spend time before bed. They would tell stories, play board games, or simply chat. Servants helped their masters prepare for bed. They brought water for washing, helped apply cosmetics, and made the bed. Taking care of their master's bedroom was one of their main responsibilities. But sleep was not just rest. In the next chapter, you will learn how the Egyptians viewed the world of dreams. For the ancient Egyptians, sleep was not just an unconscious state. They believed that during sleep, a person's soul, their ba, left the body and traveled to other worlds. Therefore, dreams were considered extremely important. Dreams were considered messages from the gods, ancestors, or spirits. They could predict the future, warn of danger, or give advice. Correctly interpreting dreams was a vital skill. There were special books, dream books, that contained interpretations of thousands of different dreams. They divided dreams into good and bad. If a person had a good dream, it was considered a blessing from the gods. If the dream was bad, it was seen as a bad omen. To ward off misfortune, the Egyptian had to perform a special ritual. He turned to a priest who read spells and made sacrifices. There were professional dream interpreters. Both ordinary people and pharaohs turned to them for advice. The fate of the entire state could depend on the correct interpretation of the ruler's dream. Some temples were known as centers of dream incubation. People came there to spend the night in a sacred place. They believed that there the gods would send them a prophetic dream that would answer an important question or heal them from illness. The Egyptians recorded their dreams on papyrus. These records are a valuable source of information about their beliefs and daily life. They show what worried and delighted people in that distant era. The subjects of their dreams were varied. They dreamed about their gods, relatives, work, and food. Through dreams, they tried to understand the structure of the world and their place in it. Special attention was paid to the pharaoh's dreams. It was believed that the gods spoke to the entire Egyptian people through the ruler. The pharaoh's dream could be the reason for starting a war or building a new temple. Thus, the world of dreams was as real to the Egyptians as the waking world. It was a space for dialogue with higher powers, and they treated this dialogue with the utmost seriousness. Nighttime was considered particularly dangerous in Egypt. The Egyptians believed that when darkness fell, the world was filled with evil spirits and hostile forces. A sleeping person was especially vulnerable because their soul traveled far from their body. A whole system of magical means was used to protect against these dangers. The most common were amulets. They were placed under the headrest, hung on the bed, or worn on the body. One of the most powerful protective amulets was the Ankh, a symbol of life. It was believed to protect the sleeping person's life force. Another popular amulet was the Jed, a symbol of stability and immutability. Images of the god Bez, an ugly but kind dwarf, often decorated beds and headboards. Bes was considered the protector of the home, family, and, in particular, sleepers. His special spells and prayers were recited before bedtime. They were intended to create an invisible protective barrier around the sleeper. The texts of these spells have been preserved on papyri and tomb walls. The bed itself was also considered a protected space. Its legs, shaped like animal paws, symbolically lifted the sleeper above chaos and danger. Sometimes magical bricks with protective formulas were placed under the bed. Special attention was paid to protecting the head. The head was considered the seat of the mind and life force. That is why the headrest on which it rested was so important and so strongly associated with protective magic. Even the material from which the bed or amulet was made was significant. Certain types of wood and stones were attributed with special magical properties. For example, turquoise was believed to protect against nightmares. This complex system of rituals and beliefs gave the Egyptians a sense of security. It allowed them to fall asleep peacefully, knowing that they were under the protection of the gods and magic. The fear of the unknown night receded. The entire bedroom environment was designed with magical safety in mind. Every object, from the bed to the amulet, played a role in protecting the person. Sleep was not just rest, but a well-organized defense. The contrast between the sleep of a rich nobleman and a poor peasant in ancient Egypt was enormous. It manifested itself in everything from the place to sleep to the bedding. These were two completely different worlds. The pharaoh and his family slept in luxurious chambers furnished with the finest furniture. Their beds were made of gold and decorated with precious stones. They were covered with the finest linen sheet. A nobleman also slept in great comfort. He had a separate bedroom, a sturdy cedar bed, and an alabaster headboard. Several servants ensured that he slept peacefully. A craftsman or merchant of moderate means could afford a simple wooden bed and a clay headboard. He slept in his small house, possibly in the same room as his family, but he already had a roof over his head and basic furniture. Peasants, who made up the majority of the population, slept on a reed mat. In summer, they spread it on the roof of their clay hut, and in winter on the earthen floor inside. He could only dream of a bed. A simple brick or log served as his pillow. Instead of a sheet, he covered himself with coarse cloth or his daytime clothes. His sleep was short, interrupted by hard work from dawn to dusk. Soldiers on campaigns slept under the open sky. They lay down on the ground, placing a shield or a bundle of belongings under their heads. The builders of the pyramids lived in special settlements in simple barracks. They slept on low clay platforms covered with mats. Their life was harsh, and their rest was short. Even the dreams of the rich and poor were different. A nobleman might worry about court intrigues, while a peasant might worry about the flooding of the Nile and the future harvest. Thus, sleep in ancient Egypt was another mirror of social inequality. It clearly demonstrated the gap between different strata of society. Comfortable and safe sleep was a privilege. The Egyptians' attitude toward sleep was inextricably linked to their ideas about death and the afterlife. Death was not considered the end, but only a transition to another state, a kind of eternal sleep. And ordinary sleep was a daily rehearsal for it. The Egyptians believed that when a person died, they fell asleep in order to be reborn in the kingdom of Osiris. Therefore, the tomb was called the House of Eternity, and the deceased was depicted sleeping on a funeral bed. That is why everything necessary for a comfortable sleep was placed in the tomb. A funeral bed, a headrest, chests with linen underwear. All this was supposed to ensure the deceased a peaceful rest in the afterlife. The headrest, as a symbol of the rising sun, played a key role in this process. It was supposed to help the soul of the deceased be reborn every morning, along with the god Ra. The walls of tombs often depicted scenes where the gods awakened the deceased. These images were not just decoration, but part of a magical ritual. They were supposed to guarantee that the sleep of death would not be eternal. The sarcophagus itself was essentially an eternal bed. Its shape and decorations were designed to protect the sleeper inside. The spells inscribed on its surface drove away evil forces and ensured a peaceful resurrection. The rituals performed before sleep were in many ways reminiscent of the rituals of preparing the body for burial. The use of oils and incense, the cleanliness of the body and clothing, all this was important for both temporary sleep and eternal sleep. The Egyptians did not fear death as we fear it. For them, it was a natural continuation of life. Every evening when going to bed, the Egyptian made a small journey into the world of the dead. And every morning, when waking up, he celebrated his small resurrection. This cycle of sleep and wakefulness was a reflection of the great cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Thus, the culture of sleep in ancient Egypt was deeply woven into their religious worldview. It was much more than just rest. It was a daily practice of preparation for eternity. We can see that sleep in ancient Egypt was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. It combined practical solutions for survival in a hot climate, a strict social hierarchy, and profound religious beliefs. From stone headrests to sleeping on rooftops, every detail had its own meaning. Studying this aspect of Egyptian life allows us to better understand their worldview. For them, There was no clear boundary between the material and the spiritual, between life and death. Everything was interconnected in a single cosmic cycle, and sleep played one of the key roles in it. What other secrets of everyday life in ancient civilizations would you like to uncover? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments.